a lot of people can talk about big deals. There's something to be said for executing a big deal. So like you look at a guy like Pat Riley and his front office in Miami, Andy Ellisberg. Look at how many big deals those guys have done over the decades, whether it was getting Alonzo Mourning, whether it was getting Shaquille O'Neal, getting LeBron James and Chris Bosh, getting Jimmy Butler. You look at a guy like Sam Presti in Oklahoma City, whether it's trading stars out or bringing them in, look at how many times he's landed the plane on a big deal.
Yeah.
Closing a deal is hard in the NBA. And, Masai Ujiri, there's another guy. He landed the plane. No matter what you want to say about anything, he landed the plane on Kawhi Leonard.
And Carmelo back in the day.
And Carmelo, yeah. And so the tough thing here is, the Knicks weren't able to land the plane. And ultimately, look, they still it's not like those picks that they have are now not there. They still have those picks. They still have the 8 tradable firsts. It doesn't mean that they can't go get another player, but you're right, Tim Bontemps. It took a long time for them to get in a position here where they had the edge on a trade. Certain teams don't have an edge, for various reasons,
they not only had the edge, they not only had the edge, they were the undisputed runaway leaders in the clubhouse.
I mean, your survey, it was 14 he's going to New York and 1 he's staying in Utah.
And the one who's staying in Utah said, he didn't think he'd get traded by the start of the season, and it's hard to do that trade in season. He didn't think he thought the Knicks had the best chance to get him. Everybody thought the Knicks had the best chance to get him. And again, to your point, maybe it will be the right decision, but at the end of the day, the Knicks have spent all this time building up capital to get a star. They had a star sitting there. They didn't use it to get him. And now the whole Leon Rose tenure, it comes down to that decision. Like it's a referendum. This becomes the whole tenure is a referendum on that decision now.
So it was reported. I wish I could tell you who did the initial reporting. I just don't know. I was gone early this week, so I apologize. I'm not trying to not give credit.
You were also on a golf cart running around celebrating, going crazy.
I was not celebrating. Trust me, I was hitting the ball in the native grass, as they say. There was a report that the Knicks offered R.J. Barrett, Quentin Grimes, and 2 unprotected firsts for Donovan Mitchell. I have reason to believe that report was accurate. And then they signed Barrett, which in theory took him off the table. Not really, but took him off the table. So let me just ask you this, because I have reason to believe that's accurate. As we sit here today, would you rather have R.J. Barrett, Grimes, and the 2 unprotected Knicks picks, or what they got from Cleveland, which is, Markkanen is a rotation player on a medium-sized contract, a lottery pick, Colin Sexton that you're paying.
Will be a fan favorite in Utah.
And I mean, which deal, as we sit here today, September 1st, 2022, which deal do you like better when we know that we're not going to know where the Cavs picks got picked for a while?
The picks. I like Barrett better than Sexton, although Barrett's more money, but Sexton obviously coming off the injury. But it's about picks. It was always primarily about picks, and the fact that they are getting at least 1 more pick, and the fact that those swaps are 2026 and 2028, which is after this Donovan Mitchell contract expires. Those swaps could certainly matter. I'm not saying they will, because even if Donovan Mitchell's not long for Cleveland, they still have a really nice core of those 3 foundation pieces. But I'd go with the picks.
What have you been saying, Brian, for 2 months, right? You've been saying, look at what teams do and what people do rather than what people say. You look at what's happened here. Danny Ainge makes a trade for 4 or 5 first, however you want to calculate it, a bunch of first-round picks from the Minnesota Timberwolves 2 months ago, right? Whatever we think is the better package, it was clear what the Jazz were going to think was the better package. And that was, to Tim's point, the picks. Get more picks.
But RJ, you could argue that RJ Barrett himself is worth 2 firsts.
You can argue whatever. The bottom line is what the Jazz wanted was the picks. And that's why, like, your question, which one is better, to me is kind of irrelevant. Because if you're looking at it from the Knicks perspective, you knew what the Jazz wanted. And you chose not to offer it up in a trade, right? So let's go back to the conversation we had about RJ Barrett 24 hours ago when the Knicks signed on this extension. Are the Knicks, because the Knicks didn't put in those picks, do the Knicks maybe not think Donovan Mitchell's worth putting in 5 first-round picks? Do the Knicks think they're not good enough, to McMahon's point earlier, that it's worth putting in 4 or 5 first-round picks? Because the team, we all agree, wouldn't really be any kind of contender just adding Donovan Mitchell to this team. Whatever the reason, there's some reason they weren't willing to put in the same kind of picks the Cavs were. So whether one package is better or not, like I'd probably like the Knicks package a little better in terms of just pure value, but that doesn't matter. It's what the Jazz wanted, and we all knew what the Jazz wanted. And the Knicks, from the beginning, were never willing to pay that kind of price.
Yeah, I just wonder if the Knicks would have gone to 3 unprotected picks by the end of September. We'll never know.
I also wonder if could they have, if they'd have thrown in maybe Dallas and either Washington or Detroit, like was there some way they could have thrown in some of that?
I'm gonna push back on that because again, go to Minnesota, go to the Minnesota trade, go to the actions the Jazz took. What did the Jazz get in that trade? They got unprotected future draft picks. What did Danny Ainge get from the Brooklyn Nets way back in the day in the Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce trade? They got unprotected, long-term future draft assets. That is what Danny Ainge was going to try to get for Donovan Mitchell. Full stop. So if you wanted Donovan Mitchell, that's what you had to give up. Like that's it. Yeah. There's no that's the whole thing. And the Knicks, like you said, Brian, you've been right on that the whole time. Look at people's actions over what they say. Yeah. The Knicks actions in this scenario were we don't think it's worth it to pay the price necessary to get Donovan Mitchell, because that was going to require them to give up a ton of unprotected draft assets. And again, that's why this becomes a fascinating debate, because you're not going to know the result of this trade for 7 years. But that's the bet that the Jazz are making on the long-term Cavs assets, and the Knicks are not willing to put up those kind of assets. That's why Donovan Mitchell's in Cleveland and not in New York.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.